Friendship, it's something we all have, but how often do we think about the purpose of friendship and what it should be oriented towards? The Institute for Advanced Physics did an article on that. You might wonder, how does physics relate to friendship? We'll get into that in this video, but I used to think that I didn't really need friendships. I had my friendship with my wife and Jesus and the family, so why would I need friends? What benefit would that bring to me? And that was very foolish. I've learned a lot since then, and I'm so glad to highlight this, and I hope that you benefit from this as well. So I'm going to dive into the article, and it highlights this point. It is through his friendships that each of us learns about God most robustly. In short, man needs love and community to grow in truth and to learn of truth himself. This addresses a fundamental concept. We learn in community, right? How did you first learn? From your mother and father, right? We learn so many things through our peers. And this is something that as you get older, you start to think, okay, well, I know enough. I don't need to be in community and learn. I can read stuff on the internet or whatever and learn that way, which you can, but I have learned so much from the friends in my life. They've taught me a lot about Jesus. I found out about Fulton Sheen through friendships. So without that friendship, I never would have found Fulton Sheen and my life would be totally different. So there's so much that we can learn from community. I've known several couples that were married and divorced in less than a few years. And every single time I asked them this question, did the husband have good male friends that were virtuous? And all of them said, no, he did not. Either they had very few friends to begin with, or friends that didn't have a lot of virtue, that had a lot of vices, unfortunately, in some circumstances. So this is a fundamental element of it, is we grow in community. I always say that saints weren't made in a vacuum. They're made in community. So if we want to be the best man or woman, we have to be surrounded by other great men and women. Next, he said, we're made for truth himself and communion with him and our fellow man in him. If we don't value and fight for our proper relationships, how are we wanting to be a part of that communion? In fact, we are asking for hell. For only in a state of irrationality, separated from truth, will our fellow man be separated from us in permanent sloth and passive uncaring. That is hard hitting right there. So hell is the permanent state of no friends, right? So we should strive to have great friendships in this life, because by that, we prepare ourselves for heaven, where we're in communion. You might say, come on, just because I don't want friendships doesn't mean I want to orient myself towards hell. But think about what Jesus said. The two greatest commandments, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. So if we're really loving our neighbor, we want to build that friendship with them. Not that we're going to be friends with every single person, but the more we close off that, the more we remove the second one, the more we think about just ourselves. Think about all these great sins. Everyone was thinking, those that committed the sins were thinking, I don't care what happens to my neighbor, I just care what happens to myself. And as we build up these friendships, we recognize the impact that our actions have. I think about, like stealing or whatever it is. When you steal, you don't realize who you're stealing from, right? When you build up that friendship, maybe your uncle worked for that company or something like that. This is, just an example, but the more we get closed off, the more we say, I don't care about anyone else, I just care what I want. It builds that, wall in our heart to care about others. It destroys empathy and all these other things. So building friendships does the opposite. And that's something that you think about the early church, right? In Acts, they shared everything. They were in communion constantly. And that is something in this day and age where we're so separate, we don't understand. So to wrap up this point, if we want heaven, we should strive to build friendships on earth, because hell is the opposite of that. Right? Hell is the perpetual lack of friendships. So if we want to model ourselves after what we're striving for, we should model ourselves to find great friendships. And the more that we don't want those, that we're like, I'm good with my life, leave me alone, the more that we're orienting ourselves towards hell. Next, he says, the more he knows and lives what he knows, the better friend he will be. And as a consequence, the more trust will be required of you as his friend. This speaks to an important point, that our friends should be those that strive for virtue, right? The more that you know and the more that you conform your life to what you know, the better a friend that you'll be and the deeper that trust will become. So we don't really want to, you always hear the phrase like, tell me your friends, I'll tell you your future. And that is so true. So we want to find friends that are virtuous, that can help us grow. And in turn, we will help them grow. It'll, kind of be like a cycle. Obviously there's friendships where you give more and you're more of the mentor. But it's also important to look for those friendships where you're being mentored by them. It continues on, each of us needs to look for friends that advance us in truth and hold on to those friendships. I'm sure we all have friendships that are more based on surface level items and you just kind of talk about the weather and, items that aren't really that deep. And then those that are focused on advancing towards the truth, right? For us, it's those friendships that focus on the faith and growing to be better husbands and wives and fathers and mothers. Those are the ones to hold on to. And Anne-Marie and I have really focused on that in the last couple of years, and we've seen the fruit in our lives and how our children have grown great bonds with their children. And it's awesome to see that. It's just such a joy to sit here and look like, wow, it's great to have kids that our kids hang out with that are also oriented towards loving and serving. And it's pretty humbling to see that we can create that environment by building those friendships. So I would encourage you to do that. Obviously today it's harder than times before, but we all need friends. As he points out, that Aristotle says that one cannot be happy without friends, and he means real friends. So if you don't want to listen to the physicist who says we got to look for our friends, look to Aristotle. There's much more that this article goes into, so I'd recommend you listen to the podcast. I'll link it right here, and check out the article. I'll link it there as well. It's a $2 donation to get that article, and it is very deep. So something I'd probably encourage doing with the men's or women's group, just to think about friendship and the orientation that it should have. One last thing is that he talks so much about friendships being directed towards truth, right? And the quality of friendship being measured by the amount of truth that brings and knowledge. And it's something I never really thought of before. But I look back on those friendships that I've had growing up where it was just, you just gossip when you're together. And there was really no fruit in those relationships. And then those people I'd love hanging out with. And those were always the ones that were helping me grow and really actually cared about me. If you're wondering where to find good friends, I would say start at your church. Just introduce yourself to people, get their phone number, build friendships that way. That has really led to all the friendships I have and has been so fruitful. I could do more videos on this. Please comment below with items that you liked. And if you've read the article or watched the podcast, comment there as well. Have a blessed day, and God love you.